everyone. I think we need to make a start. Welcome to this meeting of the Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin Integrated Care Board. It seems a lifetime since we last met in public around this table, and we've a lot to report and a lot to transact today, whilst at the same time taking care not to break the rules of PERDA because of the general election campaign. So maybe occasionally some comments might be slightly more anodyne than otherwise they might be, but you will understand the reasons for that. I've got a number of apologies, or meant to apologies. So for example, apparently Louise Barnett has apologised, but she's here. Good to see you, Louise. Louise, hot foot from her annual leave last night, I think, so good to see you. Also got apologies from Neil Carr, from Sean Davis, from Tina Long, and Peter Featherstone, who I imagine would have been, would he have been standing in for Tina? Yeah, so he sent his apologies as well. And we've got a number of people joining via Teams, including, I can see Dave Bennett. Welcome, Dave. We've managed to get you connected for once. Normally we don't seem to manage with that. Good to see you. Also, people joining us via Teams include Nitty Paul, Richard Nuttall, Pauline Gibson. I've also got Leslie Picton and Simon Fogel. I can't see you all. Unusually, we've got two screens today, not just one. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work in terms of one of you contributing and me being able to see the other screen, but we'll manage. We'll be able to cope. We'll be able to get through that perfectly ably. The agenda and the papers have been circulated. There is a part 2 for voting members only. So at the appropriate time, I'll ask public members of the press, etc., to vacate the room so we can go into a confidential session. And let me just deal first of all with some introductory comments, really, before I get into the declarations of interest and all of that kind of stuff. It's been an interesting 3 or 4 weeks, actually, for various reasons. An interesting 6 or 7 weeks. First of all, a general election has been called, and whilst it's tempting, interesting to think about what a new government might offer, whatever its colour, in terms of health and social care policy, I don't suppose any of us know any more than that which we might have studied, if we're that keen, within manifestos. We'll need to wait to see who's elected. We'll need to see who the ministerial team are, and then we'll start working with the Grain, with that team, as professionally as we always do. There's a couple of other issues which I wanted just to refer to as well. There was perception following our last board meeting that the so-called racism report, it's not actually called the racism report, but we'll come to that later, had not been dealt with as seriously as many would have liked it to be dealt with. And I think upon reflection, we were probably tardy in terms of making sure that it came to this board, but no one should imagine that masked an uncertainty and unwillingness to take the issues contained within it very seriously. And I think you'll see, I hope you'll agree, that the discussion we have later will demonstrate a huge amount of work that has been taking place and will continue to take place to make sure we can demonstrate we take our EDI responsibilities, equality, diversity and inclusion, very seriously indeed. And part of the discussion today is that we're going to have a staff story, which is unusual, but we thought it was appropriate given the topicality, if you like, of EDI, and Vanessa will help us with that later. The second issue I just wanted to mention was any of you who are followers of the Health Service Journal might be led to believe that the way we're going, we're not going to have any executive directors remaining to be able to run our ICB. There are other policies in their reporting which I've been in touch with the editor about. For sure, some directors have left. So for sure, there's been a retirement, a promotion. One had a secondment that left. At one point, the editor were reporting somebody had left who hadn't. And they were rather surprised when they turned up to their desk to discover that the parent left, but they hadn't. So there's a whole melange of misleading reports in that article, and concerns as a result of those departures, suggesting that there were problems in terms of the overall leadership of the ICB. I just wanted to put that record straight. I don't propose to go into any more detail about it. Simon's been briefing our staff through huddles and goodness knows what else about the reality of our position. And it's worth saying that whilst we've lost, departed, our Chief Nursing Officer who retired, and our Chief Medical Officer who decided to move into pastures new, we've managed to recruit two excellent replacements, whether I've already congratulated you in public, but congratulations anyway. And also Lorna Clarkson, who is the Deputy Medical Director of Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent. She's starting as our Chief Medical Officer in September, I think. So we're really delighted that they have been able to join us. The third thing that's been occupying minds significantly over the last couple of weeks has unquestionably been the dispatches programme that featured on Channel 4 on Monday. And now's not the time to get into all of the detail of our response. There will be a detailed response for the ICB to look at. I think probably it would need to be at our next meeting. I'm going to ask Katrina or Louise to say a word or two about it in a moment. For anyone who saw the documentary, I think we'd all agree it was very uncomfortable. And we all would agree, I'm sure, we witnessed aspects of care which were just not acceptable, and aspects of care which we know we need to improve upon. But I just want to make one very important point. The notion that this is purely a SATH responsibility, should anybody imagine that notion is misplaced. Some have their responsibilities, we have our responsibilities, and it's at times like this when we're trying to sort out an important service like urgent and emergency care, where we need to be and in practice pulling together to make sure that the necessary improvements can be delivered. So I don't know, Katrina or Louise, whether you want to say anything more about that to add to the points I made. Fairly briefly, because we'll have a more detailed discussion about this in time.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, clearly what we saw was a department that was overwhelmed, and as you say, there were examples of care that were concerning to see and which aren't acceptable for patients. We're really sorry that our patients have experienced anything less than the care that we would strive to provide. And we are working hard supporting them, and thank you to partners around the table for your support in moving forward with actions that we've agreed in order to address that. I think it's a very challenging time for those teams in the departments, and they really care and want to provide the absolute best care to our community. We're listening to the feedback we've got, we're taking that extremely seriously, and we'll make sure that we continue to take those actions to move forward to ensure that we provide the care that everyone would want and will be proud of.
Thank you. Katrina, did you want to add anything?
I think between you and Louise, I think you've covered off the major points. Thank you.
For now.
Yes. Definitely for now.
Okay. So let me just conclude introductory remarks, etc., with some welcomes. I'm welcoming Ian Chan, but I'm not, because Ian has been a partner member of this board since its inception. His term on the end at the 30th of June, but it has been extended, so we're very pleased about that. But also Ian has been appointed the joint interim medical director, along with Ganesh, who you will know is the medical director of Shropcom. So that combo I think is going to bring some really important complementary skills to the way in which we organise our business, and we very much look forward to working with you both in that new role. We've also got where Julian Povey, his office ends at the end of June. Julian has decided not to stand to be a partner member again. I have a funny feeling that we won't have seen the last of Julian Povey one way or another. But let me just pay tribute, Julian, to the work that you've done for the board. And let me also, in anticipation, congratulate you, because I bet you're the only person who's ever read every syllable in the annual report. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that later. I mentioned earlier that since last we met, Nick White has moved on. He moves on with our best wishes. And also, I need to announce that this will be Katrina McMahon's last meeting of the board. Katrina has decided that she doesn't wish to compete for the shared chair job. Is it shared chair?
Chair in common.
Chair in common, shared chair. All right, chair in common. And after 4 years of unstinting enthusiasm and work with SAF, we wish you the very best. Thank you for all that you've done for SAF, for the system, and for healthcare generally, Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin. And talking to you, I'm not entirely sure I know exactly, or you know exactly what you'll be doing next, but I'm sure it'll be interesting and fruitful. So you leave our best wishes. So let me then move into the declarations of interest. Are there any changes, amendments, comments that people wish to raise? Take not. And then the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 24th. Are you content that they represent a true and correct record? There is an item in the action log relating to MSK. We, the board, have promised an update on progress with the development of MSK. It says July, but I think the providers had established some kind of a deadline at the end of June. Some of us are meeting tomorrow just to have a look at that and see how that is taking forward. So we should be able to produce a report for that for the next meeting. And indeed, depending upon how we feel progress is moving forward, we might be able to send something around as an addendum to these minutes as well. Are there any other matters arising? Any other actions that people wish to raise from the last meeting? No? Okay. Questions from members of the public. We have replied to the large number of queries we had from David Sandbach. I remember when they came in. I'm looking for Alison Smith. Where is she? She's scarpered, has she? She's scarpered. But anyway, I think we fulfilled our responsibilities in responding to those, and I'm not aware of any others currently. But if there have been, they'll be dealt with in the usual. So, given the imperative, the moral imperative, the moral necessity of taking equality, diversity and inclusion seriously, there's quite a focus on today's agenda relating to matters of that type, of that sort. And we thought it would be really useful, rather than a patient story, to have a resident story, equality, diversity and inclusion, a staff story. And I'm not going to say any more than that at all, but I'm going to hand over to Vanessa just to introduce it more broadly for our debate, discussion, information.
Okay. Thank you very much, Neil. I'd like to welcome Claire and NK, who work in a provider in our organisation. NK is going to tell us about her experience of coming to Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin, and how that has gone and what the learning is from that. NK is a nurse from Nigeria and was recruited into an area in 2022, and it was the first experience of working overseas. Currently employed by one of our providers in the area, and without any further chat from me, I'm going to let her tell you about her story.
Hi everyone, I'm NK from Nigeria, like Vanessa has said. I came to the United Kingdom in 2022 and it's my first time leaving my country, Nigeria. And during my practice, while I was training to get used to the UK system, during the training it was really good, and you'd expect that coming into the system properly it would be the same, but it wasn't. When you want to talk about culture, like we were taught back then in school, way from primary and secondary school, it is said that culture is the people's way of life. And coming into a country, expect to see a different type of culture, which is absolutely fine. But the experiences from people was not a great one. Where I am currently is very good, very, very good. And it just makes me wonder what is the difference. Because while I was working in my previous place as a junior staff, you'd get to see that there are cliques and people like me don't get involved in whatever that's happening. Africans, Asians, and when they want to talk about us, they say the brown girl, they have a name for you. Meanwhile, you have a name. And even though it's difficult to pronounce, they can clearly pronounce, say, a doctor's name or consultant's name. But the colleague's name becomes a difficult one. You give them an easy way out, it's still a difficult thing to say, and so they just choose color. But I believe that when it comes to color, all there's no black and then you say this particular color, or you want to say white and then you say white is not a color, but everything are under colors. So why do you need to describe someone with their color or skin tone? And I'll give you an experience of when I lost my dad. I came in 2022, and while I was still preparing for my house, my dad was sick. And all the time I spent I was being paid, so all my money was going to my dad's friends back in Nigeria.
Okay.
So I'll carry on. Eventually, I lost him to cancer, and home. I spoke to my manager. I didn't know that there was a process you could take compassionate leave, but my elder brother has been here, so he knew some part of it. So he said, just ring them. They are understandable. They'll be able to do something, which I did, and they gave me a few days off. But I came back because I needed some more time to go back for the funeral rites. They gave me time to go back. While I was there, before I even left, apart from my ward manager, nobody said anything to me, and it was fine. I took it, probably there's this whole thing with confidentiality, and maybe they felt I wanted to keep it to myself, which is absolutely fine. But while I was back in my country, there was no access to my NHS email or work email. There was no access to anything apart from my normal Gmail. And on returning, the first email I got from work was that they had they needed my rota to sort out staff allocation. There was no word about how are you coping. And when I took the compassionate leave, there was a note my manager left saying she's going back to Nigeria for her dad's funeral rites. But she left just before I came back. So the senior nurses were managers there. There was no single thing about how are you coping, hope you're all right, nothing. And when I came back, because of the whole stress of the burial and everything, I fell sick, didn't resume work. But the work carried on. And when I came back, no one said a word to me. And I felt, okay, I got on with my job. During that period, someone else lost a loved one.
and it was everything. Everyone was saying, what are we going to get her? Should we get a car, the flower, this and this? And you just ask yourself, what is the difference? I had to travel back home to perform my dad's funeral rites, and nobody said a word about that. And when I returned, I had to fill the return to work sick form, and I was just asked, oh, sign here, sign here, sign here. And I was like, sign this. But when I came out, I started panicking. Have I signed my life away? I had to go to another nurse to ask her, look at what I was signing. And she explained, she said it's a protocol when so on. But now that I am in a leadership role, I understand what the form is about. And there is a process. Whoever is in charge can call to ask how you are faring, can send a text. In as much as some people want to keep things to themselves, and it doesn't have to be deep, which I never experienced. And some of my colleagues have also gone through the same process. A friend of mine was with an oxygen cylinder by a patient, and the data was done, but they followed up with the patient and not because it's a datex. The people handling the datex came to ask the manager, what did you do about the staff? And they said nothing. By the time they thought about sending a text, it was too late for that. And there have been other incidents where you are the nurse, you come to work, and the healthcare assistants telling the senior nurses they do not want to work with you for no reasons. They have their clique they want to be with. Or you come to work and they pair you up with agency nurses. Meanwhile, you need to learn on the job. There's not much difference from my practice in my country. And because of the policies in place, we try to be careful about the things we do. And that separation, the negative behaviors that comes, we find it difficult to ask people who are born and trained here. We rather go back to our type of people, international nurses, who have had experience and somehow are now strong and can show us the way. Everything I do currently, I have a mentor, I have a preceptor who, no matter what it is, I go to ask questions. In my current role, it is amazing. Most of them are born and bred here. They've never been outside, apart from vacation. They've not gone outside to work. But when I have discussions with them, they keep saying, oh, I have colleagues who's been to Nigeria, who's gone to, most of them just know about Lagos. And I talk about my culture and they talk about theirs. I was saying to Claire the other time that one time a friend asked, my team said they were going for afternoon tea. And I'm like, why would I cancel my bank shift for afternoon tea? Do you just go there and sip tea? And lately I had one with few Africans that have been here for long, so they now understand what afternoon tea is all about. And I had cakes and scones, and it was really, really nice. And I'm like, okay, we're doing the posh thing now. So it was lovely. And it just makes you wonder, what is the difference between these people and these other people? Why are their behaviors like this? Is it that they are not aware? Because honestly, they do need help. You employ me because you don't have enough staff and workers to do the job. And I know the job. I don't know how it's done. I just need you to show me the way, and I'll be out of your way. You can only show me, and if you want me out of your way, I've learned it. I know this is how it's been done, and I'm never going to come and ask you. And I will be able to teach other people. But when you treat me badly, I can't even ask you. I can't even learn the job. And if anything goes wrong, I'll get into trouble for it. And nobody's going to know that this was why I did not ask for help. So it's all about, what do we do to help people like myself who come in and don't have this great support, and somewhere along the line they are able to thrive and find help somewhere or amongst other people. The first experience doesn't have to be a cruel one or an unwelcoming one. It just has to be good. If other people I'm working with currently are like this, why can't these other people be this other way? So yes, discrimination is there, the bullying is there. Sometimes it's bold. Some people are bold, they do it to your face. Some people will low-key do it to you, some as a clique. You know, some it's behind your back. And they say it's the accents, and you're like, but you've also got an accent. I'm also struggling to hear you just like you're struggling to hear me. The only difference is I'm in your country. If I pick you and put you in my country with the scorching sun, how would you even cope? How would you even walk? But the training is the same. I'm a nurse in Nigeria, I'm a nurse here, and even if I go to the United States, it's the same thing. I probably just need few guidance and I'll get going. So
thank you so much. I think we just need to say a huge thank you, and that thank you for being so honest and I think the really positive thing to say now though is that NK is doing her Masters in Leadership. You've been described as being talented by colleagues, and you're a member of the current workforce where NK's working. You wish to share your story. It resonates with the experience of others. It also shows that there can be an integrated workforce, and that there is areas where there is learning, and there are steps that some teams can take to actually make them a really welcoming environment, and make it a happy workplace for all of us. So I'd just like to thank NK again very much, and ask if anybody's got maybe one or two questions, so we don't overburden NK too much.
Thank you very much indeed, Vanessa, and thank you for your very moving, compelling story, and thank you for coming here to this country to help us with the workforce problems that we've got. And it sounds as if your career is developing very well, notwithstanding some of the issues you described, which is great. Now, we don't know where you work, and we don't want to get into that, because the experiences you've described could probably apply with any of the employers represented around this table. So I wanted just to ask provider chief executives, actually, if you have any immediate responses to the you've heard. Andy, from a social care local authority perspective, you're more than welcome to contribute as well. What might you do as a result of hearing this story? Patricia.
I mean, firstly, thank you, enormously thank you. That was a really compelling sort of narrative, and uncomfortable to hear, but also really important to hear. We have a mixed workforce in a county which is predominantly European, and so those experiences I think is really important for us to hear in terms of the things that we need to put in place to support our workforce. What you describe is absolutely right. Care is care. People are people, and care is care, wherever you are in the globe. The difference is just the context in which you're providing that care. It's really important with all staff to make sure that we're providing the support so that people understand that context and the nuances. We've all been new in a job once and needing support and guidance and supervision. And really that's all you're kind of asking for, is the same understanding around support and guidance. So I think that's a really important story to hear, and important to hear from all of our staff, which is something we're embedding very much within Shropcom, within all of our organisations, not just in terms of staff forums, but in terms of learning from each other around those experiences, because many of the staff, and we have international recruits, we had our first cohort of international recruits in 2023. We've had 3 cohorts of international recruits which have been phenomenal in terms of supporting in closing our vacancies, and have added so much texture and skill and learning to us in terms of how we deliver community services. So again, I think it's that joint learning across the system of listening to staff, providing the right kind of training and development support, but also working with communities, because some of the experiences that I've heard from our staff that have come from overseas, staff that have been brought up here, that are from different backgrounds, is that and we've had issues of trying to support staff in their delivery of care to members of the public and in their interactions with the public. And so I think we have, Neil, an important role to play as Chief Execs and an ICB, not just in terms of the strategies we put in place to support our diverse workforce, but also in communities in terms of that, in terms of and acceptance of diversity and the understanding of diversity across our community.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other comments from provider colleagues?
I think I would totally echo Patricia's comment around communities as well. Yeah, absolutely echo that. And I think it's really important, that cultural, pastoral element of our responsibilities. And I know, through the work certainly at Robert Jones and wider work across the system, especially that cultural element. We've done things like, everybody bring something to eat, because it's not just one culture. We have multiple cultures now where we think where we've recruited from. But even that, food brings people together, and we love food at Robert Jones. So, just by doing that, because that then triggers conversations to happen, I think, and it takes down some of them barriers. So we've done that on quite a few occasions, and we get really good input into that. But yeah, I think the training bit and the career element is one aspect of it, and there needs to be that support there. But I think the efforts and the real action needs to take place in that pastoral, cultural piece.
Thank you very much indeed. I mean, it's to go around the room and ask for other contributions, but I just wanted to get a flavour from, well, a couple of others wanted to comment. Julian, you were next, and then we'll take a comment from down here, and another one from Meredith. But Julian, you go first.
Thank you, Amy, for coming to speak to us. It's very brave to do that. I mean, I think I just want to add a few. One of the things that I sometimes struggle is when I hear organisations talking about needing to have unconscious bias training, whereas I think a lot of our organisations need to have conscious bias training. There's a lot of bias that is happening in our society and in our workforce, which needs to be sort of challenged and actually educating people around what is needed to sort of improve the environment. So some of that is driven by government and some of the things we hear in the press. I mean, some of the changes with the sort of income thresholds for coming to the country, with the rise in the level of income threshold, and it's lower within the NHS than it is within the general workforce. So I think that really sort of impacts the ability to seek jobs. I talked to someone recently who'd come from the Indian subcontinent, who had a engineering degree from his home country, a master's from Wrexham, but was struggling to get a job in the NHS because of the income threshold, which means you have to get, I think, a band 5 level to be able to hit the income threshold. And also, I think the wider thing about the changes to the family visas and not be able to bring your family with you when you come and take a job in the UK. So I think we need to welcome, but we need a broad workforce. We need to bring that extra experience. We need to bring those people into our local society that can improve and enrich what we do. And I think what everyone said about people coming in needing support, it's also the people who are currently working here who need education and training around how to be more open and accepting. Because on the face of it, most people I talk to would insist that they're not racist. But then sometimes you hear some of the things you say, well, if you don't think you're racist, then some of the things you say feel to me like you are a racist. And I think we're all guilty of that. And I think to a degree at some point we can all be guilty of that. And I think concentrating on just educating the people coming in there, and you're not the person who's educating, it's the people you work with that need education and supporting. I think that's the key thing to highlight.
Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, I'd just like to say something about the domiciliary care sector, really, and thank you for your story and your courage. but that story, that experience is amplified in domiciliary care. And you have hundreds and hundreds of skilled workers that have been brought over on sponsorships that have lost their sponsorship due to unethical treatment, racism, just terrible working conditions and terms and conditions where their English colleagues are not treated like that. And you have a real problem here in Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin. And we've been doing work with Telford and Shropshire Council and working to kind of give tools and support to domiciliary care, your independent providers, and encouraging that culture, that work, that ethical recruitment. You've got some amazing domiciliary care providers in Shropshire and Telford, but you have some awful ones as well, who have lost their licence to people, and then you've got hundreds of displaced workers with no recourse to public funds, and you have an issue in Shropshire and Telford.
Really helpful. Thank you. Meredith.
Thank you very much indeed. Can I just say what I felt when I heard you, NK? You're brave, and what you said was amazing and fantastic, but it was also absolutely terrible, and I really feel bad hearing it, to think that a local, professional, highly competent member of staff should experience those behaviours is terrible, so I'd like to say sorry. Secondly, I think everyone needs to confront what racism looks like, feels like, sounds like, because when you hear it, you think, oh, I'm beginning to get it now, and I'm very glad that you've helped us confront it. And finally, and I hope you'll allow me a personal observation, many commiserations for the death of your father, and I would like to say, I bet he's very proud of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. That's really powerful stuff, and thank you again for having the courage to come and talking to us this afternoon. And Vanessa, what I'd like you to think about is the story, the responses from colleagues around this table, so that when we get into thinking about our EDI action, a bit of technical term, how you want this to feature part of the change that we need to bring about, because we can't just allow this to have been a discussion, jolly interesting, let's move on to the next item. This is the kind of thing that we really have to learn from and use as a means of changing the way in which we behave, we organise, and in terms of our culture. So could you just do that for us, bear that in mind, and in time tell us how we're making progress against the kind of things, with the kind of things that we've learnt about today. So thank you very much indeed. You're very welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but if you could bear it.
Thank you.
However, one thing I wanted to ask about, Vanessa, would it make sense to shuffle the agenda and take the perceptions and experience of racism report next?
Yeah, that would be fine. We'll just...
You've just... So shall
yeah, we can do.
it just seems to flow logically, really, doesn't it, from that which we've just heard?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So, as you've heard, Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin has relied on international health and care staff now for some years and continues to do so. Our international staff, in particular, are part of our a major part of our workforce in Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin. In fact, it's one of the areas where the workforce is probably as more diverse than our population, which is unusual. It often in cities people are struggling to keep up with the diversity and to reflect that. So that is really positive. We do need to make sure that we understand the experiences of people like NK really well so that we can act on them. And one way of doing that, 2021, to commission the project, which is the perceptions and experience of racism in the workforce, in health and social care, in Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin. So I think that really helps to encompass all of the discussion that we've just had as well. The report, this report that I bring, the report on the findings of perception and experience of racism, brings an action plan which has been being done at a kind of tactical level since that report findings were first known, and indeed since the report was published or final copy was received in January 2023. So the idea is that we close that action plan now and actually we see which part of that action plan, the ongoing work, is sustainable, because a lot of them were about creating education and resources to enable us to be better at integrating our international workforce and our ethnic workforce from within the UK that are born and bred here. So I'm looking to close that action plan, to present the report, but also to say what is next. And I think the thinking continues to move on in this area, and we will need to work together to have a strategic approach to this, to make sure that we're all educated and able to act in the same way as leaders, and filter that down to our leaders within the system, and to ensure that Telford and Wrekin is a welcoming place for all. So the report that you've got attached is there for all to read. There are some findings which are very much reflected by the experience that NK has given, but it also includes findings about, as Patricia's highlighted and others, that this is not just in our healthcare workers but in our population as well, and that actually calling out racism and making examples such as people asking for a white member of staff to look after them are confronted and appropriately managed at the time, and that we empower our white colleagues to act appropriately and to be good allies and in this space. And we have got really good examples in the system of where that's happened. And I think Louise will probably contribute later and tell us about how acts of individuals have actually grown into programmes of work that support others in this system, all in the time since this report has been, or its findings have been around. So some really, really good work, but absolutely we need to be clear what needs to happen next. So we measure the key improvements and action plans that we've talked about. They are quite tactical, but they are posters. They're several types of education, strengthening systems to speak up and to support colleagues, and they've been measured. Their effectiveness has been measured against the workforce race equality standards data, and I've included the latest information in there, although it changes every year, so it's quite fast paced, and I believe there's just been a recent submission but not published yet. So you can see that in most areas we're improving. There's only one where there's been some where it's got worse, and obviously that is a key focus point, but it's important that we know this data and that this board's aware of this data as it comes each year. And so I'd like to also propose that we have regular updates on the whole EI agenda, but in particular with these race standards as well. So I'm not going to talk any more. I think the recommendations that are there, I would really like the agreement by this board to sponsor a joint strategy for the integrated care system, one that is absolutely inclusive with health inequalities, because the two agendas are absolutely synonymous with each other. I'd like to suggest that leadership organisations get together and have a discussion between themselves, and I've certainly had individual discussions with some of them which have been extremely powerful, and their thoughts about what else do we need to do at a strategic level to make sure that we enable our organisations to do the right thing. I'd like to identify a partner organisation with your agreement to do a probably continued development of board education. We're probably looking at 3-session what I've looked at since we've last talked about this, so that we do some really high quality board development together. As I said, I'd like to close the current action plan and develop a refreshed action plan based on where we want to go now and the discussion from today going onwards, and propose that alternate times this board meets, that we have a brief.
Thank you very much indeed, Vanessa, and thank you also for 2 colleagues who've been closely involved with this, who are sitting behind you.
Sorry, yes.
No, that's all right. Emma Wilkins and Caroline Lawrence, you've been strongly supportive in this space, and we're grateful for your help as well. I'm going to throw it open for comment and discussion in a minute or two. I suppose the one thing that we all imagine with this kind of approach is, how do we make sure the tactic doesn't get in the way of the real deep cultural change that we're trying to achieve? So my question is, does the board think that the very important recommendations that Vanessa's put in front of us, if followed through diligently, to what extent will it help us create an improved, enhanced, the kind of culture we'd all wish to aspire to? So if you have questions, maybe you'd like to think about that part of it as part of your responses. But over to you. Harry.
Thanks, Neil. And I'm kind of a question with a question, really. And I think we've heard and been brought very vividly into light the issue of racism. But the issue of discrimination is much broader than racism. And so if you fix racism, there'll be a lot of other issues as well. So my question is, whatever we do here, whatever we approve, it must be broad enough to deal with all aspects of discrimination and not just racism, which is a really important part. I'm not trying to take away from that, but there's lots of other protected characteristics that we need to make sure are treated fairly as well. And I think in totality that would improve the workplace. And
it's a really important point, and our statutory responsibilities require us to do just that, but we'd want to do it because it's the right thing to do,
Absolutely.
not because it's the law. Thank you, Harry, that's very helpful. Meredith?
Thank you very much. I've got one or 2 observations, if I may, just and then I'll come to your question, Neil, if that's okay. So just to say thank you very much, Vanessa, very helpful to bring it all together for us. One thing that doesn't always appear in these reports is the wide range of people who are actually involved in this work, and because I've been part of the EDI steering group for the last while, I know that there's very solid representation, capable, competent, enthusiastic representation from all of our partners, and I think that just needs to be mentioned as well. Who are actually doing the work. I think highly recommend to you their contribution. And I'd say, including both councils, particularly both councils, by the way. And I think my point really is that I think a lot of their work is done despite getting the support and resources and leadership that quite often they feel is missing. I can't speak on behalf of them, but that's my observation. Okay, so any leadership support we can give them, it will make a very big difference. And when I say leadership, actually I think that is really key is interest, curiosity, interest, and a growing awareness of what they're doing and why they're doing it and the effect that they're having. So I think that's a key here. I definitely support a new action plan. I feel like the current one has begun to run out of steam a little bit. So a new action plan with specific actions, outcomes, measurements, timescales, and named ownership. So if we can see plenty of that, that would be wonderful. I can't see any reference to primary care in the report overall or the action plan, so I'd be very keen to make sure that primary care features strongly in all of this. This is a major part of our system. I wonder if we can broaden out our measurement. Res data is interesting, and so is disabled workforce data, and I completely support you, Harry. This is EDI. It's not one small part of it. It's the whole entire. So rather more subtle, nuanced set of measures would be very helpful. Just one or two observations about the report. 6.1, it refers to a serious commitment to resourcing, and I wanted to know what that meant. I wonder if one way, and I realise money is difficult, but I wonder one way might be to look at those people involved in EDI developments and think, what can we take off their roles to enable them to have even more effect in their work? So giving them set aside time, I suppose, to me might be a sensible way forward. Because all of these people are doing this as well. There's a reference to ICB sponsoring this work, and I wondered what sponsor meant. If it's we think it's a good idea, that's not quite what I would see from the activity of a sponsor. So just clarity there. But overall, I just wanted to say this is really important work, and kicking off a whole new energetic drive into this would be fantastic. And I do think it will make a very significant difference, Neil. Thank you.
Thanks, Meredith. Before I bring in others, Trevor, forgive me, if we just ask Vanessa to respond to the points she's heard thus far, and then I'll come back to people around the table. Vanessa, from what you've heard thus far, any comments?
Well, I think, of course, EDI is broader than racism, and the report was aimed to bring the perceptions and experience of racism report to this table, but the broader issues, of course, need looking at together collectively, and I totally agree with that. I think resource and leadership needs to come with a strategy about how do we strategically actually make change, and how do we identify the resource when we know what the strategy, if we're going to look at a collective strategy, not withholding that many individual organisations around the table will have local organisational strategies as well. It's a really good point, and I should have said it, Meredith, about who was involved, and absolutely thank all of the people that have contributed so far to this agenda and the action plan that we're proposing to close out. But many of them keep those actions going, because they're not actions that you just sign off; they're ones that actually involve ongoing efforts. Really, big thanks to that. And for the education that we've had ourselves as a board already from Caroline and Emma, who I'm very glad have joined today. So the sponsoring, I think, is about the really and the backing and the keeping the interest here, so that this board sees EDI as a core part of this business and continues to oversee going forward.
Thank you. So far, there are many more contributions that I want to bring in. Trevor, you're next, then I've got Nigel, Louise and Dinesh.
Okay, thank you.
If I've missed anybody, we'll come to it.
I guess mine was really great to hear, actually talking about action plans and tactics, and a question challenge rather than a proposal. I wonder whether this is an area where actually we dare to not have a strategy, because actually we can spend a lot of time, because it's so broad, as it's already been told, talking about this and just finding ourselves going round and round in circles. And as I'd like to ask the questions where we could avoid that and put all the emphasis on action plans and tactics, because actually we need a difference doing this stuff by next week. What will be different next Monday compared with today? Obviously a slight exaggeration, but you know what I mean. And if what we largely concentrate on doing is producing a strategy in the next 6 months, that could be 6 months where we could be making a real difference on the ground. And I'm not suggesting that you're not doing that on the ground as well, but hopefully you get the point.
Interesting, daring idea, but an important suggestion. Let's come back to that in just a moment. I can't remember who next. Is it Nigel?
If I may, and actually interesting because I was going to respond on the strategy point. So if I just put a SAF hat on for a second, then with Emma, with my deputy, myself, and also working with our Director of Nursing, we are looking at putting together the EDI focus, the Health and Equality focus, and also what's called EDS, the Equality Delivery System. As Vanessa points out, there is quite a lot of overlap in those areas because you are still focusing on discrimination, diversity, all of the key attributes, but making sure that we don't lose sight of within that there are actually, and we'll talk about the health elements, some quite clear deliverables in all of those different portfolios. So if I may, Chair, and just following up on Trevor's point, I think we can, and Vanessa registered this, there is work going on across different parts of our system. I think from a SAF point of view, we can bring that expertise, and I'm sure we are, and join forces together to think that. But I get the point about making sure we don't spend too long on crafting a perfect document and miss the point.
Thank
but
you.
I'm really happy to accept the task and working with Vanessa.
Support for Trevor's suggested way forward. Who was next? Patricia.
So, going back to your question around whether the recommendations within the action plan that Vanessa has set out are the right ones and do we support them, I think my simple answer is yes, completely support Trevor's point on let's not have a strategy where we talk a lot. Let's have actions that make a difference to people. My caveat to that is we need to check back with the story that we heard today. People's narratives are powerful, and so that those actions need to resonate with our staff and our people. And we constantly need to co-design and work with them to make sure that those actions resonate and are making a difference. Completely agree with Harry's point in terms of the wider elements of discrimination. However, we have a particular issue around and given that we are taking on staff that come from a number of different backgrounds, it's really important that we get this right, and if we get the principles of this right, we start to tackle some of the other issues around discrimination in terms of sexism, in terms of disability, and in terms of LGBTQ and wider issues too, which we need to own and address. My final point is we share a fantastic HR with SAF called Ria Boyodi, who on starting with us in Shropcom said, right executive team and NEDs, it's really important for you to own some of the EDI issue. I can give you some pointers around how to do it, but you have to feel it. And so she has made sure that we all have objectives built into our job descriptions, our own job descriptions, which say, so what are you, Patricia Davies, going to do as the Chief Exec within your organisation, but also as part of the system in addressing some of the wider EDI issues in terms of your own learning and development and understanding. So I think that's a real challenge to us all in terms of ICB leaders, in terms of what are we personally going to do in relation to our objectives, both singularly and collectively as well. So yes, support the action plan, Vanessa, so thank you for taking that on. But the importance of checking back with and making sure that that resonates and that we are hitting the mark and making progress. Learning from that in terms of the wider EDI issue, but us also taking individually and collectively personal responsibility in relation to that too.
Thank you very much indeed. I think probably Louise, Ganesh and Pauline Gibson, I think you've got your hand raised as well, so I'll come to you in a moment.
Yeah, I mean, clearly racism is completely unacceptable, and it's incredibly distressing to hear stories as we have today, and actually it's not a one-off, is it? It's actually people's experience, often on a very frequent basis, and we need to do something about it. So I'm personally committed to doing that. Working with Ria, who we share as the Director of Workforce, we similarly have personal objectives for all board members. I mean, I think what I welcome here is the collective action, being really clear in what we stand for and taking action which is, obvious to everybody in terms of those standards and values that we want to uphold and make sure do something about this so that we have kind and caring people that value others in our workforce, and tackle that situation if we don't, whether it's within work or in our community. We need to support people. I think compassion should be at the heart of that. The other comment I was going to make, one of the pieces of feedback we've had from some of our teams, and particularly nurses actually, is not referring to them as international nurses or internationally educated nurses. They want to just be nurses, because again they're being singled out by use of that label. So I just wanted to share that. So we are listening and trying to put into place actions which they believe will make some change. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Ganesh and Pauline, then back to you.
It's very interesting that we are talking about strategy, action plan, etc. But if we have to solution, we are actually missing the experiences dictated into what we didn't ask NK. I didn't want to put her in the spot that what would she would have expected us to behave with her when she landed in the country. So for example, somebody going to the airport, somebody having the foreign exchange for her too. Housing is a big problem with social care. Schooling, these are all basic things which are required, makes them inclusive. So by just talking about, and she said something very powerful. She said, I came, and she also extended to other Asian communities that they are completely ignored, they're not taken, and that's a very big term called racism by omission. And that's a term coined called, and all of them experience this. And this is, I've been in this country for 35 years. I come from a different color, but I haven't experienced personally. But I have seen all my colleagues, most of them, saying this, and it's a fact of life which we have to accept. But how do we move on? So a powerful, we listen to the stories, but we don't ask them what exactly they want us to do from the beginning of the day one till they get settled down. And I think that's what we need to focus. And then strategies all should be put into shelf, because it never helps. So I would be pragmatic to day one and make them inclusive rather than feeling very bad about it.
Thanks, Ganesh. Again, I mean, these are all powerful comments, and there are a couple of others who want to come in, Vanessa, before. But first of all, can we go to Pauline? Are you there, Pauline?
I am. Thank you very much, Chair. And as ever, when you're going towards the end, most of your points have already been made. So absolutely I agree with Harry around the wider inclusivity, and I agree with Trevor's action. And for me, it's the action that each of us take every single day. And a couple of things there, and with me having been off work sick for 2 months, I might be behind the curve because it wasn't at the development session. But at MPFT, we have a reciprocal mentoring scheme, which really is quite illuminating in terms of being in touch with people on the ground and understanding what's happening. So I'm happy to share if that already hasn't been done. And simple tools that keep this front of mind for each of us so that we do act every day. We don't have this at MPFT, but it's something that we're going to approach, is the inclusivity wheel, because it helps you think around all the different elements. And so for me, what are the really practical things that we can do to keep this front and centre for every single person? Because I think it's the action that will make the difference in the cultural shift. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Pauline. Again, valuable contributions. I'm going to turn to Ian, then I'm going to turn to Simon, and then Vanessa. I'm going to ask you just to draw things together for us.
Thank you, Chair. My opinion on this is quite straightforward. I echo what Trevor said. It is about the organizational ownership of EDI. In my organization, Telford, we don't want this issue, not because I'm the chair and being an ethnic minority. It is more about whether you can instill that in terms of leadership at different levels, that they take ownership, so that everyone is a champion of EDI. Yeah, it's not just about color. It's about what should happen in an organization and then whether you can support it properly. And then when you are working and think about people with mobility, etc., it's purely about meritocracy. That color is not an issue. So whether a strategy can solve the issue, I don't think so, because some of these concerns are not new. Has always been there historically, and all it takes is a pocket of staff or pocket individuals that will change the entire organization. So it is important that ownership is at every single level. I'll pause there.
Thank you very much indeed. Simon?
So I think I want to be really clear that the points that have been made this afternoon, listening to NK, just humbling in terms of how she came across and the experience that she talked about. I want to reiterate the comments that have been made in terms of it's how we set that leadership example, how we behave every single day in every interaction, regardless of an action plan, in terms of demonstrating what's acceptable and what's acceptable, and we take away and listen to the messages and the key points that colleagues around this table and NK have made this afternoon, and we've spoken about previously. I think we can develop the next steps, but I think we're the same in terms of each exec director objective linked to this agenda. So I think what I'm hearing is every executive and every chief exec across the system will have an objective built into their objective and appraisals for 24-25 going forward. So there's a demonstration, but it's about what we do with that. I don't think that was me, but I don't think I was being quite that powerful.
It was me. Apologise.
So I think how we build from here is important. How we capture the work that is already happening, as Vanessa and colleagues have done, has been really helpful in that space. I think the other piece there is we've got a collective responsibility about how we talk about this and how we report it and how this gets discussed in different forums and different places. I've certainly had a significant number of colleagues within the organisation and wider colleagues come forward upset at how they felt this agenda has been talked about and lost the point of the impact this was having on individuals. And actually the conversation we've had this afternoon has been absolutely about what does this mean for individuals and how do we demonstrate that leadership. So I think we've got to recognising that we're in public, we've got a collective responsibility in that space, and it's really important that we demonstrate the right behaviours and the right leadership in that space to take that forward. And I think we're really clear. By no means is anybody sitting here and saying, and how can you after the staff story that NK led out at the beginning, to say we've got this cracked. What we're saying is this is very clearly an agenda for all of us. It's an agenda that will continue to be one that's a focus for us, and this responsibility to keep holding to account and keep coming back into that space as well to demonstrate the leadership in that regard as well.
Thank you very much indeed. And Vanessa, guess what? There's somebody else who wants to contribute. Roger.
Very, very quickly. I think it's much more than just us having objectives. I think it's everyone having an objective. So no matter where you're working within our system, you should have this objective as part of it. Thank you.
It's a really important point. I was going to make the same point about chairs and non-executives as well as executives, but wouldn't it be fascinating if we actually promote that idea so that it cascades through every member of staff's objectives to some extent or other, which I think is Roger's point. So can we think about that very carefully as well? Now, Vanessa, over to you.
Well, I just...
Last meeting, Chair.
I think I clearly have gone already. I'm miserable.
Now, over to you, Katrina.
I was just going to reference the request on 6.1.4, which is about working with and identifying a partner. I think we've got an opportunity as boards of individual elements. We are accountable for our own performance as an organisation, but I think there's a real opportunity about thinking about how do we actually collectively develop the approach. Yeah. So rather than just about it from this board, how do we actually have a thought about working with and working in and bringing a partner who can actually work collectively with all of us. Similar approaches shaped for our own organisational uniqueness, but still founded on the same basis. The other thing I would say is that ED&I and the science art behind ED&I is shifting rapidly. lot of the things that we've been utilising, terminologies that we've been utilising, things that we should be trained upon, are now being increasingly discredited as the evidence base with regards to some of those activities is being updated. So rather than identifying a traditional NHS partner, potentially, is there do we have the appetite? Is there a means by which we can actually be working with a partner who's not based within the NHS, who's perhaps more at the forefront, dare I say that, of my NHS colleagues, of some of the ED&I agendas in the more progressive, I'm going to call it progressive areas, and so that we know that we are a couple of years ahead of where we'll need to be based on the usual.
Interesting point.
And I don't know if Trevor's got any thoughts from an academic or educational space or others, and we can maybe talk to some corporate colleagues as well for thoughts around that.
Interesting point, and thank you for that, Katrina. I promise you I wasn't trying to ignore you at all. She doesn't believe. Vanessa, there's a richness there, and I'm not expecting you to be able to simulate all of that, but
I'd just like to thank everyone really for the contribution. Loads of notes, and Caroline and Emma too, and I've just asked them if they want to contribute anything, but I think they're just thinking about it all, and we're just, as a little group really just thinking about, well, how can we help to shape that conversation into something really meaningful going on. And I particularly heard the comment about the strategy and agree, that's fine, we can re-look at that and how we do that. I think most board development now has improvement built in, so I think there is rapid improvement expected, embedded, and that's why ED&I improvement at board level isn't a one-off. It's usually over 3 sessions or so that between there is evidence of improvement in between, and the board are led to how to steer that. So embedding that quality improvement approach that we know works so well in practice into this agenda. I will take all of your comments into consideration, and we'll take it away and have a look at how we can shape that going forward, and feedback as you deem fit. But I'd certainly like to board after next week.
Thank you. Lynn.
Just a quick one from me. I suppose I'm just encouraging this conversation to include the fact that we also know that some of this discrimination can be, again, from staff towards patients and people using services. So just to make sure that it's that full picture. Thank you.
Thank you. And Vanessa, what I think would be helpful is if you and colleagues could simply do a synopsis of the main areas of action that you think we need to take forward, and if you could circulate that to us as soon as you're able to, as opposed to waiting to the next board meeting, so we're all comfortable that there's a set of things which are actually happening. That would be very useful. Simon, if I've missed your hand, I apologise. That's because I can barely see the screen from here, but fortunately Simon Whitehouse can. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Simon. Very briefly, the idea of an external partner I think is absolutely sound. I back Lynn's point about looking at it also from the patient point of view. Why can't you consider having a subgroup where you actually look for multiple community organisations that are representative of the EDI agenda and help them inform this vital work?
Again, I think that's a very interesting suggestion, and having the opportunity for stakeholders to come together regularly to help inform the work we're doing would seem to me to make a lot of sense. For all I know, we might have something akin to that now, but if we don't, then Vanessa and colleagues, if you could give that some thought as well, that'd be very useful. Thank you, Simon. Okay, thank you all very much indeed. This is, I think Meredith said that this is the renewal of the journey, really. We shouldn't ignore the fact that a lot of work has taken place thus far, contributed to by lots of people who've not been named in our papers, but the energy behind this, I sense, from the discussion this afternoon. Look forward to further advice from Vanessa and colleagues in the near future about the next steps. Now, because it seems to me to flow, Nigel, I was wondering about taking the health and healthcare inequalities paper next with Tracy, your help. I don't know who's going to lead. Are you happy with that?
Very much so, and I think it, for all the reasons that we've just said, it links quite nicely, because this is trying to look at the work we're doing collectively for and with the population. I'll let Tracy do the intro. I've got a couple of comments I just wanted to finish with, but if that's okay, Chair, I'll let the expert describe it.
Thank you, Nigel. So just to say, you'll have received the paper and a description of the work that we've done over the last 12 months in the area of health inequalities. And when I say we, it's really looking at what we're doing together as a system to address the asks within the NHS operating plan and also within the really key agenda of the Core 20+5. So the paper describes the projects that have been underway. It also describes an evaluation of how successful the initial aims of those projects have been. It reflects on some of the learning and shared learning that we have been working with our staff in terms of improving knowledge and awareness of the health inequalities agenda. It then has some conclusions and ways forward in terms of the learning we've taken from our evaluation. And I also agree with no strategy and actually having areas and focus of work. And I finished the paper with a description of the 5 key areas of focus that we'll be looking at as a renewed health inequalities team within 24-25. Because as part of the management of change, we've actually changed within our own ICB to have a dedicated, focused health inequalities team. Will have a differential impact on the work we'll be able to lead and support our colleagues across the system with. I also would want to draw attention to the 4th appendix, which is our statement of information in relation to health inequalities, which is starting to get into part of the discussion and evidence around metrics that we often talk to. Myself being at this board a year ago, where I gave you the first evaluation of the work that we had done around health inequalities and healthcare inequalities, and one of the areas that we particularly spoke about was when we're going to see some metrics so that we can start understanding whether the projects, the work that we're doing together is starting to see an impact. And now we will start having the ability to reflect and look back on the metric impact. You'll see in one of our key areas of focus, we'll be looking to listen and learn, and I think that's been brought up several times in the conversation today, about hearing back from the individuals themselves who we're working on behalf of to improve access, experiences and outcomes of healthcare. So I'll just stop there, Nigel, and hand back over to you.
Thank you. And obviously, we're really happy to take any questions. I think there was just a couple of things I wanted to add. As we have, again, I would just want to pay tribute. Andy's here to colleagues Rachel Robinson and Helen Onions from us, our Public Health. They are so involved as our teams across the council. So just to reiterate, when Tracy mentioned system, this is our health and care system with voluntary and charitable sector colleagues as well. So I think this is a developing area. The other element on that wider system bit is that as we've also been looking at, and we know this is one of the primary 4 main objectives of an integrated care system, we've been looking at the integrated care strategy. Probably a bit of irony given what we've just been saying about strategies, but I think it's really important that that is held and owned by the Integrated Care Partnership, and again our local authority colleagues as well as NHS. We're really keen on that, and we've been doing a lot of work thinking about the measures of effectiveness and outcomes system-wide, including the health inequalities bit. I think the other bit, and Tracy alluded to this, we developed some really good momentum, I think, through last year on many of these, and we really want to both maintain and
and accelerate that momentum. We had a really useful ICB board development session in May, where I think the conversation was wide-ranging and broad, and that was useful. We are doing a programme of sessions with all of the partner boards over the next month to 6 weeks. So, you know, with South Stropcom, Robert Jones, MPFT already have quite a wide-ranging programme, but linking with Neil Carr and Steve Range, the deputy. I think the other bit is we also, and Tracy alluded to it, so within the management of change, health and equalities comes under the chief strategy portfolio, but as does strategy development, as does the development of integrated neighbourhood teams, as does the work that we want to do in concert with all partners across the organisation, across the system. That is deliberate, because we don't want health and equalities to be a thing. We want it to be part and absolutely aligned to all we do. And obviously, as we've been hearing this morning, the work on EDI is yet another aspect of that. So as we look at developing our work together for the improvement of the health of the population, what we do, you know, with staff, then I think this is entirely our plan to try and align and include all of that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Comments? There's a set of recommendations under section 6 of the report, which I imagine you've had a chance to. So I guess I'm asking you, are you broadly content to accept those recommendations, Ganesh?
I just wanted to, I'm pretty sure I can't see maybe that we need to also, as Vanessa very nicely added, that ED and I are probably quite together, or they should be taught together. I can't see any. You're getting a lot of populations who can't speak English. So you've got a differential population who are actually will be falling in H&I, would have difficulty in accessing healthcare, and all the core 5+ also. So I can't see anything practically we are thinking on those lines. So that's something which is very, very important. We need to think about in future.
Did you want to respond to that?
Yes, more than happy to respond to that. So the work that I've shared here is at that very high level in terms of the areas of focus. Actually, once we start drilling down into the project for the core 20+5, which we know include our plus groups, include our ethnic minority groups, there will be practical actions on the ground. And when I look at some of the areas that we haven't taken forward so well this year, they do relate to those reasonable adjustments, and actually they're quite simple reasonable adjustments if we listen to what communities are asking for. We do have some really good examples in our core cancer champions work around the inability to access our services because we as a service aren't providing the correct type of information. So it is easy to do that work if we listen to what people need. The level of detail you won't see in the paper that I brought to board because I've kept it at a higher level than that.
So that is a consideration. But the other major thing which I really wanted to highlight is people with additional difficulties. I don't use the word disability at all. It's a disgrace, disrespect. We should have in the strategy, how do they get access to our wonderful systems of delivery of what we want to do. So that these two groups are really important, which in true reality are H&I.
No, firmly agree. So happy to accept that.
Really valuable, Ganesh. Thank you. Louise?
Yeah, I welcome the paper, thank you. I think it brings structure, focus and accountability actually to some really key issues. I know within the organisation we are doing more and certainly drawing on some of our community partners in order to do more work in terms of co-producing what we do, understanding people's experience and delivering services in a far more tailored way, but we have a long way to go. So I think this is helpful in focusing that down a bit further for us. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Louise. Niti, you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. Really good paper. Thank you for it. I have a question and a comment, I guess. And my question is around data sharing and how we use data to inform health inequalities and then take a programmatic approach to actually implementing change. And I think none of that is possible without interoperability of data systems, both from social care and health. We have a huge amount of data. How we're using it, and that board development session that we had on population health management demonstrated that. So for me, it's a question around, where are we reflecting the need for data sharing, interoperability of systems, and really taking an approach to using that information in the right way to actually target health inequalities well. Because we've been talking about health inequalities for as long as I can remember, but the fire is still burning. There's lots of smoke, but the fire is still burning. So that would be my comment on the question as well.
Thanks, Nikki. What I'm going to do is just gather together comments and questions and then hand over to you both as part of the conclusion and moving on. So thank you, Niti. I think, Andy, you were probably next. Then I think Meredith, Roger, and Ian. Andy.
So I think this is such an important document, and what we're talking about here is absolutely core to our work as a system. So I draw people's attention to actually those building blocks articulated just at point 7.1, because I think that covers all the areas that have been spoken about, particularly around data sharing, particularly around bringing that information together. And I think, albeit taking on board the comments around strategy made earlier, I think there's something about us being consciously tactical about this and making sure this remains central to all our work, because this is about, I think, putting our money where our mouth is. And the last bit for me is going back to the impact measures. There's something about how we describe the new now, soon, later piece with this, because I think there are some quick wins that we can take advantage of, and that will, being blunt, will give us some of the financial advantages that we seek, as well as a system, as well as clearly those wider advantages around health, population and management.
Thank you, Andy. I'm just going to keep the ball rolling for a moment to Meredith. You're probably next.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Really enjoyed reading this paper. Very informative, and I really do hope it guides everything we do. There was a reference to understand or evaluating the return on investment, and I got the impression that it was from our own initiatives, and it just struck me there must be a massive body of evidence that supports return on investment. We don't actually have to prove it ourselves. We can rely on extensive evidence to support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
Yeah, thanks. Just to add the point that Andy's made, at what point will we actually get some measures of impact? Because that tying in the enablers to the impact is hugely important in this, and if we are seeking to make an impact, we should go for the ones that are the most readily attainable and to demonstrate cause and effect. But at the moment it's quite difficult to see that from this information. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian, and then I'm going to hand back to the authors.
Okay, so I'll start off if I may.
Well, Ian first.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Ian. Sorry.
Right. I thought I got a very loud voice over there as well. Thank you, Chair. I just want to second what Niti has said, because we need, as a system, we shouldn't have digital as an afterthought. A lot of the work that we're going to do or plan to do, we need to think about, if we think about cost and benefit analysis, so about return on investment, we've got to have digital to be thought of in the outset to see how we can improve the effectiveness. I mean, the first thing I can think about right now is about integrated neighborhood teams. So we need that team to be digitally enabled. So this is without thinking about how we're going to deliver the INT team, but before that we already know there's a space for that. So I think we just need to make sure that digital is at the forefront of how we consider the next step forward in terms of planning for services.
Thank you very much indeed. Gosh, another rich discussion, lots of good ideas. Let me just put my favourite one on the table, as it were. This idea of the quick wins and measures of impact. We say this regularly. I think it's really important, and I'd be grateful if you could give that some priority thought amongst the other things that you've heard about. But Tracy, Nigel, what do you make of the comments that you've heard?
Yeah, and thank you very much indeed. Really, really useful. I think it is perhaps also just an observation that I'm not sure we'd have all known as much about some topic 12, 18 months ago as we do now. So therefore, I think it's important, and I think I'm grateful, Chair, for the opportunity we had, as I say, last month for a board development session on this, because I think that was intended to try and make sure that we start to introduce more of the information share, broader aspects of that. So again, we can be better informed, but also as we've talked about with a range of different partners, making sure that we also share where there are gaps in our knowledge or opportunities. As well as Meredith's point from and others from across the UK or elsewhere. From a interoperability, and perhaps Nitty and to a certain extent Ian's point, there is we spent quite a bit of time last year as a system and a collection of partners working on that. And just with my military background, getting an intelligence picture. And we knew that there is a richness of data, but lots and lots of data in different places doesn't give you an intelligence picture. So having to bring that together, and we were led by, and say that's where I think our local authority colleagues have really helped us create that focus. Indeed, obviously that's why we need to link it to the broader indices of deprivation and all the other aspects that we work with. So the intelligence picture has been really important. Under Claire Skidmore's team, Performance in BI, they've been working on a dashboard which we brought to the board in January initially, but we're interrogating that and making sure that is able to respond to the questions we want to ask and also provide us with the information. And I'll pass to Tracy in a second. In terms of the early wins, I think Tracy may be able to comment, but where for example, we had to work on cancer champions and others, then that is really, really important, and I think we can demonstrate in a number of the different, especially core 20+5 areas, the changes, and the evidence of return on investment. And absolutely, we'll take that. I think what we were just trying to do was make sure that we were signalling an intention to make this not an ethereal and often talked about, but there was some measures of effectiveness underneath that. Sometimes the measures and the outcomes will not be instant and immediately available and apparent because of the nature of of the changes in healthcare. But may I pass over to you, Tracy?
Last word, Tracy, and then we'll move on.
So we have quite a few questions there. I think you've addressed some of the data issues, but what I will say about the data, and one of the things that we're picking up in this year's work plan, data to prove the case for health inequalities. The case is proven. What we do need is better quality that can show the impact. So one of the things that we're really focusing in on is working in a data quality improvement way to improve our ethnicity coding, because actually without accurate data I won't be able to show accurate impact. So that's one of the key things we're doing here. Just want to assure Meredith that it's the way the paper has been written, Meredith. It is to actually for the team to look at all of the information, because again the case is out there. If we invest correctly in terms of targeting and addressing health inequalities, we will see change in sustainability, not only in our own financial resources, but actually for the individuals and the lives of the individuals that will change who are currently experiencing poorer outcomes. So I think I'll just stop there unless there's anything else.
That's great. Again, thank you both very much indeed, and help us as soon as you're able to with some measures of impact and some quick wins, so that we can look at those and feel the surge of confidence that this is really something that we're taking seriously. So excellent discussion yet again. Now, we've not done the exec's report, and I'm going to suggest we have a few minutes break now. I'm told there are beverages available outside. Then we'll come back and do Simon's report, and we'll take the rest of the agenda from there. So 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Thank you. Yeah, good. I've already done it once, but it didn't
But it's anecdotal, Tracer. We've got it written down.
All right. Despite Julian Povey and I's best efforts to get everybody back to their seats, we've not succeeded. However, we're going to start again with Simon's report. Item 47, Simon.
Thanks, Chair. So, as ever, we'll assume that the paper has been read. So I cover 5 areas in terms of an update of business that's not picked up elsewhere on the agenda. The first part is the update in terms of the Management to Change programme around shaping the ICB. I talk about the progress that's been made in that area, the appointments process that's now being worked through to get people into roles, and the suitable alternative roles, 4-week trial periods that's working its way through as well. It would be absolutely remiss of me not to recognise and acknowledge the ongoing impact this has had on colleagues, on staff, on teams, given the uncertainty, given the change, and at the same time we've been asking individuals to deliver on the work and to deliver on the increased expectations around this. So I absolutely thank colleagues, but recognise that in the update on that piece. We are at a point now, you've touched on the recruitment that's taken place in terms of the appointments of the Chief Medical Officer and Chief Nursing Officer. Within the next couple of weeks as well, hopefully we will have finished recruitment in terms of the Chief Strategy Officer role, and so are also working through in terms of the senior leadership team restructure part of that as well. So we're coming to the point where we've got clarity of who's in which role, and that enables us then to continue to focus on the team development piece and the organisation development piece, which is equally important given we're talking about how we work in a different way and how we engage differently in that space. So there's a really important part around values, behaviours, leadership, the approach that we adopt, whilst recognising we've still got individuals that are unsettled and not got definitive outcomes in terms of a final landing place in some of this as well. So we continue to be sensitive in that space, we continue to work carefully in that space, but we know that we need to be making that progress and bringing that through to a conclusion. Since the last public board, many colleagues will be cited on the infected blood inquiry report. The update provides the NHS update in that, and also talks about the main headlines from an NHS perspective in terms of the next steps and the resources available to support any individuals in that space. Since we last met in public, we've had the publication of the SAT CQC report, which is recognised in here. I could go through that in detail, but I'm just not sure. I'm sure, Louise, whether there's anything that you would want to highlight in particular about that.
I mean, we were pleased with the improvements that we'd made being recognised, but I think we also recognise the challenges we still face, and you would absolutely see that reflected in urgent emergency care, both across both hospital sites, and that plays into some of the discussions that we had earlier. So we have some clear plans there working as an organisation, but also with partners. And we've used that opportunity, and whilst acknowledging the progress that we have made as an organisation, also we know there's a lot more to go, and we're very committed to continuing to progress in all of the areas that were outlined, whether that is urgent emergency care, maternity, or other areas as well. Thank you.
Thanks.
Can I just highlight 2 or 3 things from the CQC report which caught my eye? Not just the maternity improvements, and well done with those, but also the recognition of significant progress in terms of CYP and end-of-life care, which is great to see. So well done, everybody concerned, in terms of those areas too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Louise. I talk about the Open Up campaign that's been launched across the system in terms of loneliness amongst children in the area, and the focus that we've got in terms of how we look to empower and target and support with practical tools in terms of preventing loneliness and encouraging children to open up to a trusted adult about how they are feeling. It's an integrated campaign, NHS, local authorities, running across a number of channels. It's a really powerful message and a really coordinated message being articulated in terms of there. And then there's the important aspect of me updating the board on an urgent decision regarding the operational plan that was taken outside of the formal board process, so needs to be reported back here. Colleagues will be aware that we've had and been working with NHS England and with partners on a number of revisions to the plan for 24-25, and what the paper sets out in here is a revised position that has been submitted, which is a £90 million deficit revenue financial plan, and also the paper sets out where we will get to in terms of activity and performance. It notes that there were no changes to the workforce submission, that was as it was previously, and that £90 million revenue financial deficit plan is set out by organisation in section 6.3 of the paper, but wanted to make sure that from a governance perspective we closed the loop and brought that back round to the board. So happy to take questions or comments on any of that, Chair.
Julian?
Can I ask a question about, based on SAS, CQC and Neil's comments? I mean, we have seen improvements in children and young people, and it's amazing. I work in the west of the county. I don't ever now have a family who I need to admit who questions that they're going to Telford. They recognise that's the place to go, and there's no question about that seems too far, and where we sometimes do get that in other specialities. And in maternity, there's been a tremendous turnaround with the number of obstetricians employed, and there is a huge cadre of young, dynamic obstetricians. I was wondering, what learning can we take from that to improve other services, and it's particularly around the consultant recruitment and retention, other services where we have a deficit of consultants, or a lack, not a deficit, but a lack of consultants against the established numbers, because they're 2 areas that are tremendous in terms of really.
Louise?
Yeah, I think that's important. Certainly having real focus and ambition around what we want to achieve and involving teams in that has been incredibly helpful. We did have some interviews actually yesterday around urgent emergency care, so we have been able to offer a number of roles, which is really encouraging, given where we are, but also how much we do need to secure people to work with us going forward. I think we're working with the other specialties as well to make sure that we're really clear about those strategies and plans, making sure that we're creating roles that are interesting in terms of their range of duties that people would carry out, affording sufficient development and flexibility, and all of those issues, so that they will be attractive to apply for, with the necessary support in place and teams. So we've put a lot of effort into how we're doing all of that, in the context of wanting to deliver care for our community. So we have made some progress in terms of our ability to recruit and retain, but we've definitely got.
One is a big turnaround, because number of years ago people say, do I have to go to Telford? Whereas we don't hear that. People they know that's where they're going, and they're happy to go there, and they're happy to get themselves there. Yeah. It's very positive. Yeah,
I mean, we are involving our teams far more in working through the changes that we need to bring about, and also listening to our patients, families, communities, and we know we need to do more on this, how we work with them in bringing about that change, working with our teams. And I think those ways of working and that those efforts to change culture within the organisation are paying dividends. We've certainly seen that with the staff survey, but we're still not where we would want to be. Overall, the scores aren't where we would want to be, but the improvement is significant across the different domains. So more to go, but we're very focused on trying to create a great place to work as well as delivering great care.
There's two bits I would add, Julie, as well to that. I mean, Louise' comprehensive response. I think the importance of HTP actually in terms of the future model of care and what that looks like and the clinical consensus around that. So the importance of that progressing under a new government is really key, because that's undoubtedly changing the clinical conversation. And then I think the opportunity around the interface work between general practice and secondary care and the relationship piece in that space also has an impact in terms of recruitment as well, because you're asking people to come in and work where they want to engage with
a conversation.
Sorry. You asked it a question.
Probably going to give a better answer than me, Harry. In terms of that relationship with general practice and that interface space is also really important, an area I think we can continue to build on.
Any other questions? Sorry, I'm still chuckling about Harry's equipment, giving us the recipe of the day.
Find out what the answer is.
Katrina.
I think just to Louise's position, our recruitment challenges now mirror the national picture much more accurately compared to where they maybe did 3, 4, 5 years ago. So the areas where we have greatest recruitment challenges, so intensive care, cardiology, urology, some other of those areas, they actually reference the recruitment challenges nationally. Sorry.
Ask Harry for help. You're right.
Oh yes. Yes, thank you.
Not if you keep asking questions.
Any other questions? Meredith.
Thank you very much. Simon, on the section on the organisation going through its change, and you referenced a comprehensive organisational development programme, and I just wonder if you could give us a flavour of how that's going to be delivered and when and by whom, and just a bit more detail, just what to expect.
Yeah, and
just in addition, back in March there was a reference in the paper to your paper to it's called a board wellbeing guardian, and I haven't seen anything more on that. So if you could just refer to that in your answer, that would be great.
So a couple of bits in that then, Meredith. The first bit is got, and part of the change programme was the development of an OD plan, and we've got that set out. The conversations that are taking place now is how best is that delivered, and so what does that look like and what does that mean? How much can be done internally, how much can be done with partners, how much do we need an external partner with that, and some of that we're in conversations with NHS England as part of the RSP support as well, but wanting to make sure that we're really clear what the ask is in that space. So as I sit here now, I can articulate the programme is clear, the ask is clear, how that's being delivered is the implementation of that as part of the conversation that's taking place with execs and SLT now. Some of it is already starting to get put in place anyway, so the regular lunch and learn sessions, the investment in terms of the focus on how we bring teams together, how we use the commissioning cycle, the case study work. So there's a number of strands that play through that, but we're still working through the full implementation and detailed plan that sits. And on the other points, I'll need to come back to you, Meredith, outside to make sure that I'm linking to the right reference rather than trying to give you an answer now that I'm not clear in terms of the paper the point in the paper from January that you. So I'll make an action.
Help you, it was in March. But,
I'll make an action to come back to that then. Thank you, Meredith.
Well spotted, Meredith. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Simon. Informative as usual. Thank you very much indeed. We're now going to move into item 50, the Integrated Care System Performance Report. Claire Skidmore.
Thank you. Obviously, we're still quite early
early into the year in reporting terms and the data that's available. So the report that you have in front of you brings together as much of the information that we've got, and as we have been developing and explaining to board over a period of time, we're trying to integrate what we bring in terms of finance, activity, performance and quality, because none of those exist in isolation of each other. What we have done as a response to a request from board this time is to pull into the core report a dashboard now which has the key performance headlines in there and month performance. That will obviously expand over time as we move through the year, but hopefully that provides a kind of easy visual for those who want to just have a quick look at where areas of interest might be. So that will continue to grow as we move through the months, and we'll show you our assessment of achievement against the in-month plan. Of note to draw to the board's attention, from a finance perspective at month 2, we were pretty much on plan. I celebrate that very briefly because I do also need to, well, I don't need board members, you're very cognizant of the fact that actually it's a really tough year in terms of delivering that 90 million deficit plan that we've got. We know that there is a ramp of our efficiency programme into the latter part of the year, and we know that we've got challenges already in some of the activities that are happening across the system that will impact on finance. So much as I'm pleased to report that we're pretty much on track at month 2, that does come with quite a significant health warning given some of the risks that we've got and the issues that we need to deal with. I think in terms of other positives, I'm pleased that we can list some of those in the report. So we've seen an improvement in our category 2 response times. We flag here what board members have already been briefed, which is the official exit from tier 1 site for cancer, and certainly the detail in the paper talks about our ambition for further improvement through the year in terms of that tiering, and we note other good areas of progress. Workforce is a topic that we talk about a lot in our committees and here at board, and I'm really pleased to say that we can see the sustained impact of some of the hard work that's gone in through the teams, particularly around reduction and sustained reductions in our agency expenditure and our early delivery of 100% compliance for our agency staff being on framework rather than off. So I wanted to make sure that we highlighted that there because that's a really significant achievement for teams across the system. We do, as you would expect, have some areas that still require improvement. None of these will be a surprise to colleagues here. Still seeing issues around our 4-hour A&E targets and patients that are waiting longer than 12 hours in the emergency department, and we've highlighted here increases in our cancer weights over 62 days and some of the IPC metrics that I know Quality and Performance Committee in particular are taking a keen interest in. So as I say, no new surprises, but certainly areas that we need to make sure retain and maintain our focus on so that we're looking at the improvement trajectories that we've set ourselves for those. That's probably as much as I was going to headline from the report, but I'm quite happy to take any comments or questions at that point.
Can I just raise a paragraph 232, the higher than the national average neonatal deaths, SAF has commissioned an external review from the Royal College of Physicians. Is that the right Royal College? No, it's not, is it? It should be paediatrics, presumably. Paediatrics
There was two actually.
Yeah.
It was commissioned from one Royal College supported by another Royal College, and I've forgotten which way round the two are, but we'll definitely correct it, get it correct.
I mean, my eyes are lighted first of all. I mean, typical college leisurely approach to publishing their reports. The work was finished in November and we're still awaiting the final report.
Yes.
Can we chase them up?
We
are chasing them.
Yeah, we are. And also the from now the chair of the Quality and Safety Committee at SATH, and I believe she might have touched upon this with Meredith and the ICB Quality and Performance Committee as well, is that there, you know, that we have had some initial feedback on, but we don't have the final report yet. So
well, I mean, the sooner we...
It's not that we're sitting doing nothing.
So no, I'm sure. I didn't think that for one moment. The sooner we get that, the happier we'll be. Any other comments? Month 2. It's a bit sort of foamy in many ways, isn't it? It doesn't get meaty and begin to show any degree of significance till month 3 onwards. So my suggestion is, Nigel, you want to come in?
Yes, it wasn't on that topic, Chair.
I was just going to say, my suggestion is, for the purpose of this meeting, we note the report and we await with interest month 3 and subsequent reports. Nigel.
Just one of the topics on the in the cover sheet, just talking about the reporting from the SATH patient admin system. I think the paragraph which explains it more probably has got the relevant detail, but there's an element there about has impacted on cancer and long wait backlogs. Just wanted to assure the board that is as people get used to the system. There are some duplications on people adding patients to the waiting list. There is not an impact on the patients being prioritised and treated, and there is validation exercises going on to make sure that we've got obviously the true picture, but it is not impacting on timely treatment and prioritisation.
So in other words, we've not lost any patients
correct.
During the transition.
Absolutely correct.
Very reassuring. Julian?
I've got one question and one sort of point, I think. My question is about the EPR and waiting times for outpatients. So up until October, primary care were being provided with a monthly update with waiting times to first outpatients, and we've not had an update since October from SATH. The initial reason, I may be wrong with this, but what I understood was because of preparation for the new EPR. The current reason is that the new EPR is in place and we're unable to have that data. So I'm just wondering, is that just an urban myth, that explanation? I mean, and will we get back sort of accurate waiting time data for first outpatients? That's my first question. The other one was just a point, because primary care always gets criticised, but in the paper we see primary care appointments at 261,000 and A&E attendances of 13,000, and I think it's just being aware of some of the, you know, our statistics can be misreported, because I was reading an article this morning saying that from the GP survey, 18% of people had tried to get an appointment with GPs and couldn't and went to A&E, but 18% of 261,000, even if that's actually only 82%, would be, you know, 45, 50,000 people, and there's only 13,000 that go to A&E. The other bit was a recent study by NHS England that looks at whether there could be patients to be seen in different places when they attend A&E, rather than basing on outcomes, they base it on point of triage, where they said only 4% of patients in 17 units that NHS England reviewed could be settings, not necessarily primary care, but in the community at the point of triage, which would be a very low number of patients that would then have to be reabsorbed back into primary care. So I think it's just important, you know, to take this opportunity as the voice of primary care to say that you need to be careful of, you know, hanging onto the coattails of some statistics, and undoubtedly that NHS survey is right, it's giving a figure, and I'm not arguing with that, but it's interpretation into the numbers and what that means for our local population. A lot of our local population, 261,000, which is, you know, they're not all individual people, they're not different people, is, you know, it's half our population we're seeing in primary care, you know, and that is a, you know, a huge figure, and you know, that is an ever increasing figure. But more importantly, a lot of those patients are patients who are waiting to be seen in SATH or have been seen in SATH and are waiting to follow up, and that is an increasing workload. And there are, having said, be careful with figures, I have heard that 30% of GP workload is currently weighted is actually in dealing with patients who've got outstanding secondary care appointments. It's trying to manage those patients. So really having an understanding of the weights for outpatients is key to informing our patients and keeping them informed about what the treatments they can expect and when they can expect to be treated.
Agreed.
Absolutely, yeah. And obviously, I know it's obviously not just a local issue in terms of the challenge on backlog. So I'll pick up obviously I'm more familiar with the digital aspects rather than the business information and reporting for the first outpatients. Certainly, in the run up to doing our the patient admin system change that we did just in the beginning of April, and then subsequently there's been a heck of a lot of focus on making sure that the reports are both accurate and timely. So I would imagine that just trying to make sure that is accurate. Julian is there. Happy to take that point back. I suppose it may well be, unless this board wants to receive that, I can just deal with and link with Julian and colleagues and GP, but sort of GP board and stuff.
Because certainly between sort of July and October last year, there were significant improvements in the waiting times in key specialities. So it may be that data is hiding a positive story.
And we've seen that in the reduction in 104 to 78 weeks to 65 weeks, and the work that and collective system that we're doing, not just South. So, but I'll absolutely link with Julian in primary care and Ian. And
the final word, I like the high-level dashboard. Really helpful. If people haven't had a chance to look at it, I commend it to you. It's very useful. Great, thank you, Claire. So we'll now move into annual reports and accounts. You remember last year we had two sets of annual reports and accounts, the OCCG plus the first part year for the ICB, but this year we've only one. So, thank goodness.
Thank goodness.
Whether that will make our workload less, I'm not entirely sure, but over to you.
Thank you. So yes, this is the first full annual set of accounts for the ICB. As the report describes, you have the annual report, governance statement and annual accounts. This is the final leg of our sign-off process for these official formal documents this year. So we have included in the papers here are those final drafts for review by the board. Along with the letter of management representation that we will sign off subject to board support, and also just to aid consideration a copy of the external auditor's findings report as well. I'm really pleased to say that the audit has gone well this year. Our external auditors were very complimentary about the standard of information that we provided to them and the quality of the responses that they've had to their questions. And you'll see from the findings report that they've had very little in terms of what they're able to report, which from my point of view is heartening. So we have no adjustments required with an unqualified audit of the accounts. We have spotted and referred to Julian's eagle eye earlier in this meeting, an error in a table which is a prior year comparator for one of the remuneration tables, which we have subsequently updated. So the version that you have in the pack will look very slightly different, very slightly different. Actually published, but there's nothing material in there, and it's been corrected. We took our suite of documents to Audit Committee last week for them to review as well, and I'll pass to Roger in a moment just to ask for his views as chair of the Audit Committee, but certainly I'm commending these papers for sign-off today by the board. Roger.
Thank you. Yes, the Audit Committee reviewed the annual reports and accounts and the audit opinions from both external audit and internal audit. I think, as Claire said, the audit has gone very well this year, so it's a real plus for everybody involved. It's been a straightforward process and quicker, much quicker than expected. One concern is clearly the financial sustainability of the ICB and ICS, which we know about, and that has been highlighted by the external auditors. And our internal auditors highlighted concerns, limited assurance around our board assurance framework processes, which we also know about. So those are two issues to be taken forward in 24-25. But otherwise, the Audit Committee is to recommend approval to the board of the annual report and accounts 23-24. Thank you.
Everybody happy with that? Well done, Claire, and your team, and the many others who contribute towards these. And thanks, Roger, to you and the Audit Committee for your assurance. Very, very helpful. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. Ronnie, really quick. I know you said thank you, but just from my perspective, the comms team, Alison's team, finance team, the work done across the organisation. I know you said thank you, but important I say thank you from the Chief Exec perspective as well. They've worked really hard to get this to this board all done and all completed, so thank you to colleagues for that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. We're full of thank yous. Will it last? Will it last? Let's move on to item 52. Review of the primary care access recovery plan. Gareth, I think you want to say a few words by introduction, do you?
Yeah, if that's okay. Well, I'll cover the report if that's okay, Chair. Just briefly, again, consistent with others, I'll take the report as read. Colleagues will be familiar with the fact that the primary care portfolio is now under the Chief Medical Officer's remit, but obviously with the transitioning, the history of this sits very much with me, so with Ian's permission I'll work through the report. The Primary Care Access Recovery Programme is a system response to a national framework that sets out as part of the improvement programme for primary care a series of areas that each system is required to deploy through primary care for improving access. The paper sets out our progress in 23-24 and plans for 24-25. Since the launch of the primary care programme in May last year, there have been a significant number of improvements across the county, particularly in the digital telephony side of the care provision. That's really important in terms of how our patients access primary care and simplified mechanisms for accessing the primary care or general practices across the county. The expansion of the R's role, so these are non-GP roles within the primary care network in particular, which has expanded the number of appointment slots, non-GP appointment slots to a significant extent, and with the engagement with the overall general practice improvement programme. At the same time, we've seen 2 practices merge and 1 PCN change into 2 PCNs. That means that we now have a round number of 50 practices across Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin, and 9 PCNs. The review of 23-24 allowed all of the funding that was attached to the primary care access recovery programme to be allocated across to the GP practices. That reflected a sampling approach to each of the primary care networks, self-declarations around the compliance with what was required to be delivered. And the paper goes into some significant detail around the areas that practices were requested to deliver on. Moving forward into next year, that review mechanism has changed slightly, and the paper details the way forward for 24-25. On that basis, Chair, I will take any questions.
Okay with that, Ian? Anything you want to add?
Yes. I think we are progressing well. All the PCN are well engaged into this process. And also, as one of the steps moving forward is the development of a primary care and secondary care interface group, which is already way, and we have the full commitment from all the CMO, from all the major providers into this, which is fantastic. And we're building strong relationships. We're not quite there yet to look at the nitty-gritty of details, but we are progressing towards that. And also the primary care improvement and transformation group has already been shown good signs that when it's woven into the greater governance part of the organisation of the ICB, it will hopefully make a significant difference. And Simon made a very good point that we're going to make sure that these key mechanisms are interconnected properly within the system to ensure its effectiveness are positive.
Thank you very much indeed. Everybody happy with that report? Thank you, Gareth. Oh, sorry, Julian.
Yeah, just some particular points. I mean, generally, obviously, welcome the primary care access recovery plan. It is good. It's just bit that I wanted to query, something that I've asked before about, which are the self-referral pathways and the deliverability of those. They're in the table, and the part of the ICB ask for this year is to deliver self-referral to MSK, self-referral to audiology, community podiatry, falls response, wheelchairs, community equipment. Now, our responses to those, we've delivered none of them. Although we've agreed in our report, we're saying we're not delivering some because they're not practically feasible. Wheelchair delivery, is never been a very challenging area, and I don't know why that's been picked for a self-referral, because it's inappropriate for a self-referral pathway, although it does need a lot of reorganisation and input into it. But some of them would be key to improve patient access to services, the self-referral to physio, audiology, and community equipment. Obviously they'd need an assessment there, but a referral into that service would be good. So it's more just about, we've no answer now, but I'm not sure the answer. In some of these we're saying we're doing them by June 24. Now we've got 4 or 5 days less than June 24 to start some of these services, and they're not happening. So I'm just wondering what the update around those was.
Thank you, Gareth.
So on the one that's specifically June 24, you're right, that was initially planned for June 24, but because of some of the difficulties we're having in terms of the commissioning, that's now pushed back to March 2025 in terms of the likely implementation now. But I think it's a really fair point. I think there's a raft of areas within this programme, some of which have been successfully delivered and some which we are not as successful as we would want to be. But we've got to be carefully progressing that, balancing the needs of primary care colleagues, making sure we're not overwhelming individual practices, but also making sure that the services where they're currently provided are not overwhelmed either. So there is a programme of work which is working through this, but I completely respect the position in terms of some of those pathways are unlikely to be deliverable. But that's part of the work that we'll go through in 24-25.
Do we need to adjust this paper to make that clearer? Is that, I think, part of Julian's point, is it?
I think so, because you would get the impression that they are happening or about to happen, whereas I think there are significant challenges against.
Yeah. Although, as you pointed out, there's still 4 days to go to the. I think it'd be better if that was just corrected.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, the Learning Disability Mortality Review Annual Report. Vanessa.
Thank you very much. So take the paper as read just by way of introduction. This is the annual report from the programme which seeks to learn from the lives and deaths of people with learning disability and autism. This has been running since 2017, but autism has been added in more recently. So it's about improving care for people with learning disability and autistic people, reducing the health inequalities, and preventing people from having early deaths. The year to date, had a range of stakeholders contributing to this programme, as is the usual governance around it. A lot of the action is very much co-produced, and each review is looked at really carefully, and particularly key episodes in that person's life, to see if that has contributed to their death and what we can learn from that. And nationally, the age of death of people with learning disability in particular is still remarkably lower than those without. So we continue to strive to contribute to this. Having said that, this year, for the first time since I've been involved with this programme over the last couple of years, we've seen a much lower number of notifications, and there is good cause to believe that's due to notifications rather than because we've had less deaths. So that means our learning's really restricted and the data is less reliable this year, but it is always low numbers, it's thankfully, but it's particularly low this year. So there's a key partnership approach to improving the reporting of cases. And the reports can come from anyone. They can come from a healthcare professional, the general public. In reality, the majority come from primary care and from learning disability experts and specialist nurses. So so that is absolutely key, and the data should be read with that in mind. So we have seen a reduction in the age of death, which again is the first time we've had that. We've had a year-on-year improvement in age of death until this time. So again, really need those notifications so that we can understand that. Focus from those deaths that are included, the 21 this year, which includes pneumonia, which is a really common cause of death in this age group, sadly. The report's there for please look at. The group will act on the recommendations and inform their year plan, notwithstanding the need to increase the notifications, which are voluntary. There's no mandate to report. And the report's there for approval today, please, to meet national deadlines at the end of the month.
Thank you. People happy to approve the report? Ganesh?
It's just a useful suggestion because I've been struggling to accept also, because I do the learning from death review panel for Shopcom for quite some time. So I also get surprised that we don't have much of leader. Is it the recording of it correctly? And I also wanted to, I'm going to go back and check that what is the Shropshire learning disability numbers? Is it comparable to what is nationally or regionally? And if it is not, that's something wrong we are doing. So we need to really look into it, because it's easy to accept that we've got low numbers, but is it the true reflection of low numbers? Because nationally it's well agreed that they die very early and the numbers are more than 20 years less than. So it will be something interesting to look into, because I've been struggling also looking at it. Is our workforce getting it right?
Yeah, and we absolutely need to get those notifications up so that we can maximise on the learning, as a quality improvement approach. Actually, the quality and the quality gen system quality groups having a deep dive looking at.
Do we have the right coding? Do we have the right coding to capture them? Okay. That's what
we'll add that.
Little bit unsure.
Thank you for drawing our attention to that, Ganesh. Vanessa, if you could pick that up and liaise with Ganesh with your findings, that would be really helpful. That apart, people happy to accept this report? Thank you. We then move into board committee reports, assurance. I'm going to take it that people have read the reports, so I don't feel the need to invite the chairs to speak to them unless there's a particular issue or particular issues that you want to draw to our attention. The first one is 2 quality and performance committee reports on meetings 28th of March, 25th of April. Anything extra, Meredith, that you want to draw to our attention from those?
No, thank you.
People happy to receive them as presented? Thank you. There's no report from Audit and Risk. Finance Committee report for meetings held on the 26th of March and the 29th of April. Trevor, anything extraordinary you want to tell us about?
No, I think Paris already covered it.
Yep, thank you. And the Remuneration Committee Chair's report seems self-explanatory. Is everybody happy with that? Thank you very much indeed. Kathy Oh, there is. Over to you, Kathy.
Thank you. So, Chair, this was our first meeting of our new committee, which is Strategic Commissioning Committee, and it's including primary care. I'm delighted we've got a lot of clinical input into that, and Nitty has agreed to be the Deputy Chair. I'm delighted with that. And we've also taken on the Commissioning Working Group as part of our group. The reason you haven't got a paper is because Jeremy's on holiday. So forgive me for that. The 2 important things is we agreed the ICB choice policy and the elective access policy for it to come to the ICB board to be approved.
So that would be the next
one. But I just wanted to flag it now in case Simon needs to get it into the NHS system. And we had a big debate on health inequalities with Tracy and Rachel and Nigel, and we'll be actively questioning every strategy now about dealing with health inequalities.
That's really helpful.
And they were our main items.
Thank you, Kathy. Any questions for Kathy based on her verbal report? People, Culture and Inclusion Committee Chair's report. Katrina, Oblique Stacey, anything to report?
So just take it as read, other than that's associated with the report is actually the People Annual Report, which is included within the information pack.
Okay.
And I think it's a very good summary of the amount of work that Ali supported Stacey, as well as her own team and people across the system have collectively worked on together to deliver.
And in terms of this committee, we'll be looking to it to help us oversee the the development, the kind of discussions we've had this afternoon? In terms
Yeah,
of
so we we actually received today's paper. We received it at our committee meeting last week, but because we only met last week, there isn't a paper to be included in today's pack. So we had a preliminary conversation in support of Vanessa and the team for today's presentation.
That's good.
And we will overlook it. We're still to determine which elements we will be overlooking versus those elements that will sit with providers.
Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Sorry, there was, with one eagle eye, I did notice I did try to just message Alison Crowley, there is an audit committee report in there. You said the way, because of the...
I'm sorry.
It's put in, it was in the appendices pack,
Yes,
so I notified it, so that shouldn't be